Friends, hello everyone. Nadia Smirnova is in touch with you, and this is the third lesson from the fruit cycle. Today, we are drawing a plum with you, and also in this lesson, I will tell you in detail, not in accelerated shooting, how I hatched 2 plums, and we will analyze this moment in detail. Well, now I'm doing a preliminary sketch. At first, I very easily sketch pale enough berries, and then, when I am already confident in my drawing, when I know that they are arranged well, and I am satisfied with the composition, I circle more clearly. Now I've already started tracing. I have a pencil Ash B, and I drew this whole lesson with this pencil. Well, friends, I made a pencil drawing, and, using the example of these 2 plums, I will tell you in detail how I will stroke them. These are such, you see, an interesting color scheme, a little bit not monotonous, such a kind of misted up as if some kind of fogged glass. Very beautiful texture. Here we will try to convey it. Very beautiful plum color. Well, let's get started. To begin with, in principle, you can just shade. To shade, we stroke according to the shape. Well, you know, it's enough that such hatching is actually ordinary. We are not doing anything out of it yet. Just stroke, trying to convey the volume. That is, according to the photo, we see that the light from the top right is a little bit, so from the bottom left, we will darken it a little bit. And look at the plum. Why doesn't it merge? Yes, as I said, if you put a white egg on a white drapery, we will see this egg. It will not merge, so that we do not see either the eggs or the drapery colors. Objects of the same color, if we put them side by side, we still see where we have the first, where the second, where the third, where the front plum is in front, where the plums are in the background, and so on. And here, we also clearly see that our plums do not merge. Why? Because there is a form of objects. There is light, there is a shadow, and the object that is behind. It is clearly visible that it is darkening to the front object. That is, this is where we are going to start darkening with you now. Back drain to separate one plum from another plum. I look at these moments carefully all the time, at the moments of junction. We ask ourselves all the time, what is lighter, what is darker? For example, it's lighter here, or it's lighter here than here, and it is clearly visible that it is darker here than here. And we continue to stroke, taking into account this moment. Always, absolutely always, something will be lighter and something will be darker. And this is the inner question we constantly ask ourselves. And what is lighter? What is darker? When we draw 2 planes. Well, here we certainly need a nag. Here I have just taken a nag, prepared it already in advance. Well, we kind of look at the subject, yes, and try as much as possible to discern all sorts of subtleties and nuances. And there are quite a lot of them here. Here, I am gradually going to try to convey this texture, that is, this spotting. We take it and redraw it. Also, shading is not in one direction. we try to shading in different directions. I have an Ashby pencil now, and I'm just trying to identify the darkest places so far and shade them. And just with such ragged spots, we draw somewhere, darken somewhere, do not darken somewhere. Now it's just these ragged spots. While it is possible to take a tone a little darker than here, you have at the beginning shaded everything else, everything basic. Will be a little darker later, if we need to, if we want to dial the right tone. Gradually, gradually. Notice some points. Here, for example, is this plum. Its edges are on the top right. They are quite light. This plum has such a reflex here, you can immediately emphasize it. That is, here, it has a little bit of such light. Well, here we can see this plum. Once, we immediately try to convey what we saw. I start to draw a little with an eraser and highlight, whiten where I see that we have light. You can make an eraser here where in other places. We see that glass is generally the main thing here, this kind of heterogeneity of tone, dirt, spotting. We will create, of course, with a nag and an eraser, but this kind of cosmos of such cosmicity. At first, we just redraw as much as you know how to transmit. Where it's dark, we put dark places. Let you have more than one in one, one on one. It will not always work out that this reflex is light at the bottom of the front plum, which still helps us to see what helps to see the shadow of the plum tree, the lower shadow of the plum tree. It's getting darker to the subject, darker to the drain, and I'm throwing a little shadow now, just to emphasize this reflex. Then, when you shade the rest of the background, they will become more voluminous, more lively. I enhance the dark places. Now I'm just working through everything at the same time, shading, and then we'll go through all this stuff a little more with a nag. Of course, what I am drawing now, there is no way to compare, yes, with other objects, with the background, because only these are my first two plums now, but later, when all the others are drawn, we will look at these first two, compare them with the others, compare everything together, and already make a decision, leave us this option. Or you need to edit something somewhere, lighten it on the contrary, strengthen the shadows, and so on. All right, I'll take a fin, a quack. You know, let's just dial a little more. Darkness. I want darkness. So, I got this spotting. The difficulty here is that there are several gradations of tone. Not only is it dark, and there is a lighter tone, yes, but there are also the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, that is, darker, then a little lighter, 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 very dark, very light. In general, there are many variations where it is necessary to preserve this kind of picturesqueness of the subject. But now, we are going to try to achieve these semitones all interesting, different, with the help of a nag. Here, pay attention, such a light reflex is already falling light. I fell once, and such a speck was formed, a beautiful bright speck. It almost glitters. Here too, it is there, maybe a little less. Here and there, you can see what kind of eraser I have, how I cut it off. Here in such moments, it is very convenient with this sharp edge of the eraser. I have it a little dirty. Of course you can rub it so that we are slightly, well as slightly. We draw what we need to draw. Where it is necessary to whitewash, we whiten as much as we need. Well, in some places I'm still an eraser. Here you even know, I just realized that the eraser is a little more convenient. We find the brightest places and begin to lighten a little. Maybe not the lightest, but they are lighter than the others. Well, probably, for now at this stage we will leave it like this. These are the 2 plums that turned out, and I'm now starting to finish drawing all the other plums as well. Well, roughly according to the same scheme that I drew these 2 plums, now I'm starting to draw the rest of the plums. In general, you are trying. I had to show you exactly 2 plums. I recommend, of course, that when you have a bunch of grapes, draw everything at once. This is important enough and helps you enough. Then you have this degree of comparison of one plum with another constantly present. That is, not to cling to any one subject, but to start picking up semitones everywhere, and gradually, everything starts to grow in tone. That's how I like to compare with how Soviet photos were taken before. They photographed them, put them in a solution in the dark, and then they all manifested at the same time. First dark places, then some semitones, then bright moments, and that's how gradually your work should grow. But I also sometimes sin at this moment, so to speak. You see, now, since I have already started with 2 plums, somehow counting them in order, I begin to draw the rest. Well, in general, your work at any stage, I always tell my students about it, should be ready. Whenever I approach you, I tell them, all the time at any stage, your work must be ready. In other words, if we act by analogy, that we stroke the semitones all at the same time, then dark places, then light ones, we work through, then this can be achieved quite well. I put the leaf under my arm again, so as not to dirty my work. Well, so now it's enough, you can say, casually throwing on the tone. It doesn't matter because it is a substrate. As you remember from the last lesson, there should be at least 2 shading, and therefore now I can afford to make this substrate like this by throwing a tone, and I will do the second one about shading more thoroughly. There will already be a more noble touch. It will already flow in form here. But now, because inside, if we look at each of these individual berries, it's like I don't know. It reminds me of a planet from a satellite. Here, it is all very beautiful, heterogeneous, and I tried to use a rather motley stroke. At the edges, of course, I use round drains, especially in the substrate, but a round stroke. But inside you can do a variety of stroke directions. And we always look, yes, here it is very good on this example of this. You can learn from this small production how to draw the first plan, the second plan, the third plan. There, the photo shows enough how unfocused the sharpness on the rear drains is unfocused. That is, the first plum we have is more elaborate, bright. The first one there is the first, second, third. Here's the second row, so to speak. And in the end, we already begin to work out the details a little less, and thus we show this aerial perspective here. We can see this volume deep into it. That is, the front berries are a little more sharp. We draw the rear berries. We stroke a little more, as if in a kind of fog. And so all the time, we are trying to separate one object from another object, one berry from another object, and look at the edges of the berries. I keep wondering where it's lighter, where it's darker. That is, there is the first berry, there is a second berry behind it, and all the time, I think where it is lighter, where it is darker. I don't mean about the first 2 berries, but in general, in principle, about all the berries. We can see them all clearly, where each of them starts, where each of them ends. Darkening in front, but mostly the rear plums are darker than up, for example, in front of a standing plum. And that's how we stroke it. All the time, the joints, the rear drains are darkened. First, we draw as a volume, as if there is no texture, just balls, just imagine, just balloons, right? And you need to take and draw their volume, and then separate them from each other. And only then, at the end, with the top layer, we apply this extraordinary texture, a very beautiful texture of these plums. A mottled, misted, colorful, picturesque, somewhere a little more darkening. This is no longer tied to the shadows falling there and the light. And by itself, here is the color of such an unusual plum. We are trying to convey this texture here, but basically, here I say, if you have already applied the tone, then you take a nag and highlight it with a nag somewhere. Add these spots somewhere you need to whiten it with an eraser. Look at the top left plum itself, as I whitewashed it from above. To be honest, I didn't even touch it with an eraser. It's all in bloom there, and the right plum below is also the upper part of it is the rightmost. It's in the light. Well, I throw a little background, I throw a little table, on which there is a plum. There is a plum. It is absolutely necessary, at least to show the table, so that it does not fly like this plum in space. But still it stopped and lay so that it can be seen that the plum is lying. Not only the table, but also for this, you need to work out the shadows from the plums. Of course, this is very important. Shadows from the object you are drawing. I draw greens, I draw twigs. I try not to touch the twigs, and then at the end, I will highlight them even more with an eraser, so that they still fly out, come to the fore. because now it's all mixed up a little bit into one song, into one story. I want to separate one from the other. Here. I continue to refine the table. Well, the finishing touches. Finishing touches. In the end, I'll take another nag and light it up in some places where I need it. I draw on the table. I throw a little texture of wood so that it is not so boring. I'm finalizing the leaf, trying to make it more voluminous. Well, friends, perhaps that's all. That's the kind of plum I got. Thank you very much for watching.